Hello everyone, welcome to my podcast, Book and Story World with author Priya Gorawal. During Season 4, Episode 10, I have decided to review all the films I have watched and enjoyed during spring 2026 so far. To begin with, I enjoyed a thriller called Number One Fan. The film is about a male movie star who has a one-night stand with a female fan when he is engaged to another woman. The fan becomes a bunny boiler as she becomes a dangerous stalker when rejected by the movie star later in the film. Number One Fan is an enjoyable thriller to watch. A supernatural horror thriller I enjoyed is Among the Shadows featuring Lindsay Lohan. The film is about a female werewolf detective investigating her uncle's death. The detective's path crosses Lindsay Lohan's character's path, who is a vampire in the film in a political role. The secret werewolf investigator finds that her uncle's death is intertwined with the presidential election. Among the Shadows is a riveting supernatural horror to watch. Another entertaining supernatural horror I enjoyed is Demon Hunter, released in 2005. The film is about a demon hunter who is half human, half demon, and used by the church to slay evil demons on planet Earth. The hunter's name is Jake Grayman, played by Sean Patrick Flanery. The church assigns Jake to help stop Satan's latest plan to unleash his spawn into the world. Demon Hunter is an excellent, entertaining horror to enjoy. During spring 2026, I have had the delight of discovering the deceased Elvis Presley's films from previous decades. I particularly enjoy the light-hearted element and effect of Elvis films. My Elvis film journey started with G.I. Joe, released in 1960. G.I. Joe is about Elvis's character, who is an army soldier called Tulsa, who also sings. Whilst in a club, Tulsa's soldiers, friends and himself place a bet on whether any of them can get a dancer who dances in a nightclub to spend the night with one of themselves. The film is then about Tulsa wooing Lily the dancer whilst trying to win the bet. G.I. Joe is a fun comedy for all to enjoy. I decided to watch a film I have heard of this spring but never seen before, called Rocky. I also watched Rocky 2. Rocky is an entertaining sports film about a fairly unknown boxer's rise to fight the TV champion Apollo Creed. Rocky 2 is about the pair having a rematch. I thoroughly enjoyed both films and found Rocky's rise to the boxing championship along with watching his personal life very entertaining. Both films star Sylvester Stallone. I had a wonderful time watching a children's fantasy film called A Wrinkle in Time, Parts 1 and 2. The film is a magical adventure as a young girl and her brother must enter a new dimension to rescue their scientist dad, who has been abducted by a villain from another world. Help and guidance arrive for the children in the form of 3 magical witches. Both parts of A Wrinkle in Time are a fun, magical fantasy for people of all ages to enjoy. Another excellent horror film I watched is Spellbinder, released in 1988. The main character in the film, called Jeff, sees a woman being hit by a violent boyfriend. Jeff rescues the damsel in distress called Miranda and takes her home with him. As Jeff starts a romantic relationship with Miranda, he finds out that she has fled a satanic cult, Witches Coven, who are responsible for killings in the area. Spellbinder is a fantastic horror with a shock ending. Another excellent thriller film, if watched to the end, is True Crime, released in 1996, which stars Alicia Silverstone. Alicia Silverstone's character, called Mary, starts trying to discover who the serial killer is in town who has been killing teenage girls. Mary ends up teaming up with a young male police cadet called Tony. The pair try to discover who the killer is with unexpected consequences. True Crime is an excellent thriller to watch. Back to Elvis films. I also enjoyed a film starring Elvis called Frankie and Johnny. The film also has a light-hearted comedy atmosphere. Elvis plays Johnny, who is a riverboat performer with his girlfriend Frankie. The boat also has a casino. When Johnny is told a red-haired woman will bring him luck at the casino tables, he begins to search for her, angering Frankie in the meantime. Frankie and Johnny is an excellent, wonderful, unforgettable film to watch. Another Elvis film I thoroughly enjoyed is Wild in the Country. In the film, Elvis plays a delinquent who must move in with his uncle after getting into a physical fight with his brother. The film then becomes about Elvis' character called Glenn's relationship with a therapist who he must see weekly as a condition of his parole. Wild in the Country is another fantastic Elvis movie. An excellent action army movie I enjoyed this spring is a film called Red Sky. The film is about a fighter pilot called Butch who is selected to lead a team into recovering a weapon of mass destruction. The film is interesting as one of Butch's decisions to bomb an area was pulled into question in his past. Red Sky is definitely an excellent action film to watch. Another excellent Elvis film I watched is Love Me Tender. In the film, Elvis plays a young farmer who married his brother's widow after finding out his brother was killed in the Civil War. However, things take a chaotic turn when the brother turns up alive and well. Love Me Tender is a great film with a heart-wrenching ending. Love Me Tender is definitely a favourite of mine in the collection of great Elvis films. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, released in 2010, starring Nicolas Cage, is an excellent children's fantasy film to enjoy. The film begins in Old England with the wizard Merlin being betrayed by 1 out of 3 of his apprentices. Merlin's apprentice Horvath has allied with the evil sorceress Morgana Le Fay, who kills Merlin in the opening scene of the film. Another apprentice called Balthazar, played by Nicolas Cage, stops Morgana from killing more people by magically trapping Morgana and Horvath in an artifact called the Grimhold. Before Merlin dies, he gives Balthazar a dragon statue which will identify the one who can destroy Morgana once and for all in the future. Next, the film jumps to a 10-year-old boy called Dave in modern Manhattan, who the statue identifies as Merlin's chosen one in front of Balthazar. 10 years later from this scene, Dave accidentally releases Horvath from the Grimhold and aligns with Balthazar to defeat evil once and for all. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is a fun, entertaining fantasy for all to enjoy. Back to Elvis films, another great film is Kid Galahad, released in 1962. In the film, Elvis's character Walter becomes a boxer when he returns to his hometown. As with other Elvis movies, Kid Galahad is a light-hearted, feeling pleasurable film to watch. A strange, unique horror comedy film I watched is Night Bitch, released in 2024. The film is about a woman who stays at home to look after her 2-year-old son whilst her husband frequently attends work trips. The woman then finds alterations to her body which make her believe she is turning into a canine dog. The film is entertaining, humorous and strange, one which I highly recommend. Another very entertaining Elvis film I enjoyed is Clambake, released in 1967. Elvis plays a wealthy man's son who swaps places with a ski instructor at a hotel in Florida to see if he can meet a woman who likes him for him, as opposed to his father's money which he is set to inherit one day. Again, the film is a very entertaining comedy to watch. A fun horror film to watch is called Hell of a Summer, released in 2023. The film is about a group of summer camp counselors returning to the summer camp, only to be killed off one by one by a masked killer. Hell of a Summer is definitely worth a watch. A hilarious comedy film I enjoyed is Let's Be Cops, released in 2014. The film is about 2 male friends called Ryan and Justin who attend their college reunion dressed as cops. When pedestrians assume they are real police officers after they leave the reunion, the two begin to leave their abode continuously, pretending to be police officers around citizens. Let's Be Cops is a hilarious comedy that I definitely recommend. An interesting drama to watch revolving around 2 teenage girls is called Havoc. In the film, Anne Hathaway stars as 1 out of 2 girls from wealthy families. The 2 girls' lives change when they are determined to join gangster life by choosing to hang around with drug dealers. The premise of the film is about the influence of hip-hop videos on teenagers. Havoc is an interesting, very entertaining drama to watch. Another great Elvis film I watched this spring is Flaming Star, released in 1960. Flaming Star is an emotional western about a young man called Pacer, played by Elvis, who is the son of an American and a Native American woman and is considered mixed race. Pacer and his brother are caught in the middle when the Texans and the Native Americans war against one another. Tragic consequences lead Pacer into choosing a side between the two. Flaming Star is another excellent Elvis movie which also evokes many emotions. Simply Irresistible is a fun, light-hearted film released in 1999 starring Sarah Michelle Gellar. Gellar's character, called Amanda, inherits her deceased mother's restaurant. Gellar ends up buying a magical crab for Cooking, who escapes into the kitchen. Unbeknown to Amanda, she begins cooking divine in taste meals and desserts, which is secretly due to the magical crab. Amanda's culinary magical adventure means she crosses paths with a shopping store manager and romance blossoms. Simply Irresistible is a light-hearted, fun comedy I thoroughly recommend. During Easter weekend, I watched a film called The Carpenter's Son starring Nicolas Cage. The film is very different as it shows Jesus as a child living with his parents. The film is a darker take on Jesus' early life when himself and parents are haunted by evil supernatural forces. I'd say The Carpenter's Son is worth the watch due to its unique dark perspective. Another Easter film I enjoyed was the animated Book of Joshua, Walls of Jericho, the title recognised from a song sung in primary school. The film is about Joshua leading the Israelites who fled the pharaohs of Egypt in the story of Moses to the Promised Land. However, Joshua must bring the walls of Jericho, the fort city, down to cross into the Promised Land. The animation is an excellent telling of the biblical story. An action comedy film I enjoyed this spring is Bad Company, starring Anthony Hopkins and Chris Rock. Chris Rock is hilarious, first playing a CIA agent who is killed during an operation, and then playing his separated at birth twin brother who hangs around on the streets and is asked to pretend to be his dead brother for a CIA mission. The film is a fun watch for anyone in the mood for an action comedy. An enjoyable animated film is A Tooth Fairy Tale, released in 2025. The animation is about a tooth fairy called Van who is bored of his teeth collecting duties and breaks the rules by becoming friends with a goblin girl called Gemma, when the two species are hostile to one another. However, the two tribes must settle their differences to save both specimens from annihilation by the evil spiders and Spider Queen. A Tooth Fairy Tale is a fun watch for all ages. Tyler Perry's A Divorce in the Black, released in 2025, is an excellent thriller drama if given the chance to kick in. The film is about a woman who is devastated when her husband leaves her. When the woman begins a new relationship, her ex-husband becomes an unhinged, evil, deadly stalker, turning the film into an excellent thriller. An excellent, even horrifying drama is Gaslit by My Husband, released in 2024. The film is about a married woman who starts to become psychologically manipulated by her husband as he tries to portray her as violent and unstable as a wife and mother to their two children. When the woman leaves her husband, she is later attacked one night in her home, raising questions of who the attacker really is. The film is a riveting must-watch for drama thriller fans. An excellent film series I watched this spring is Left Behind. In the first film, Left Behind, the movie released in 2000, millions of people of all ages disappear from the planet Earth in the Christian foretold event known as the Rapture. The rest of the film is about the remaining people of the planet trying to understand what has happened. In the second film in the series, Left Behind 2, Tribulation Force, a group of Rapture survivors come together to discover and destroy the rising Antichrist believed to be a political figure. In Left Behind 3, World at War, the final film in the trilogy, the group of survivors commit to destroying the Antichrist who is planning to destroy the planet by hitting it with nuclear bombs. The apocalyptic Left Behind trilogy is an excellent, interesting, terrifying in concept film series I also thoroughly recommend to those interested in Christian scripture. An excellent horror sequel I watched this spring is Hollow Man 2, released in 2006. This time, the dangerous invisible antagonist is an army soldier who was experimented on by the government. In the film, the quest of the invisible soldier is to find the antidote to invisibility as his life force is crumbling. Hollow Man 2 is an excellent, exciting horror to enjoy. Another great Elvis movie I enjoyed this spring is Jailhouse Rock, released in 1957. The film is about Elvis's character Vince, who learns how to play the guitar in prison. When he is released from prison, he becomes a famous singer. Jailhouse Rock is another fun, joyous film to enjoy. An interesting thought-provoking film to watch is God's Not Dead, released in 2014. The film is about an American college professor who challenges a student who is a devout Christian to prove the existence of God in a presentation to the college class. The film challenges atheism and makes the viewer question whether he or she believes in God too. God's Not Dead is a very interesting watch, especially for those interested in philosophy and religion. The sequel film, God's Not Dead 2, starring Melissa Joan Hart, released in 2016, is another thought-provoking philosophical experience. This film is about a teacher who is put on trial for forcing her beliefs about Jesus onto a student when asked a question about Jesus. The film is another interesting, thought-provoking film to watch. 3 more Elvis films I enjoyed this spring is Viva Las Vegas. It happened at the World's Fair and Harem Scarum. In Viva Las Vegas, Elvis plays a racing car driver called Lucky who wants to win a Grand Prix race and works as a waiter to pay for a new car engine whilst trying to pursue a love interest. In Harem Scarum, Elvis plays a movie star called Johnny who is promoting his most recent movie in the Middle East. Elvis ends up being abducted by captors who want him to assassinate their king. It Happened at the World's Fair is about Elvis caring for a child who's alone as her uncle can't be found whilst attending Seattle's World Fair. All 3 Elvis movies are fantastic, even hilarious comedies and all-round good-feeling movies which are a pleasure to watch. A disaster film turned horror is Thrash, released this year. A town is hit with a hurricane which leads to the town being heavily flooded. The townspeople must try to survive as the waters bring a host of deadly predatory sharks with them. The film is nail-biting, tense and terrifying as the viewer watches the characters trying to not get eaten by the sharks. Thrash is definitely worth a watch. Another horror film I enjoyed this spring is The Sand, released in 2015. The film is about a group of young people waking up one morning after a party at the beach the night before. The film turns terrifying when one of the group steps onto the sand only to be horrifically killed and swallowed by the sand. The group must then try and save themselves from the deadly sand without stepping on it. The Sand is an extremely entertaining, excellent horror to watch. A fun comedy to watch is Relationship Goals, starring Kelly Rowland and released in 2026. The film is about a female TV producer going head-to-head to battle for a position in the workplace with her ex-boyfriend, who has been hired by the same company and cheated on her. Although the content of being cheated on is serious, Relationship Goals remains to be a light-hearted comedy to watch. Crimson Peak, released in 2015, is a dark gothic period drama which is definitely very dark, I'd say. A female receives a ghostly warning as a child to beware of a place called Crimson Peak. Later, unknowingly, the female called Edith marries a man called Thomas Sharp and unknowingly moves into Crimson Peak when she moves into her husband's mansion. The graphics for the ghosts in the film are awesome as Crimson Peak is haunted in the film. The revelations in the film are shocking, making Crimson Peak a must-watch for period drama and horror fans. The Adjustment Bureau, starring Matt Damon and Emily Blunt, released in 2011, is an entertaining thriller romance which is very unique in concept. Matt Damon plays a politician who meets a ballerina he kisses before delivering a political speech. Damon's character David loses the US Senate election. The next scene then shows a mysterious figure tasked with spilling coffee on David, so he has to go home and change, instead of bumping into the ballerina played by Blunt, which he is about to do. The film is very mysterious due to an organisation affecting life secretly by knowing what events take place in the future. The film deals with religious entire world concepts as the organisation displays godlike powers. The Adjustment Bureau is a must-watch. Finally, this spring, I also enjoyed Scream 7, the latest film in the franchise. Neve Campbell is the main character again, playing Sydney, who is married with a teenage daughter in the film. Scream 7 brings the fun element of Scream films back to life again, proving to be an excellent, entertaining, fast-paced horror with the maternal element of Sydney racing to save her daughter from the ghost-faced masked killers. Scream 7 is a 10 out of 10 excellent horror I recommend to all. So that's a review of all the films I have watched during spring 2026 so far. Thank you to anyone who tunes into my podcast, and thank you for listening to this episode. Until next Wednesday, have a great week, everyone. Take care.